Okay, so we'll go ahead and start the, excuse me, I just clicked on Finance Committee, Law and Licensing Committee report.
Okay, then I'm looking at item 14.2, United Way West Ed request for de-identified student level data. This was a discussion of a data sharing agreement with both United Way and West Ed that was missing an element of that's necessary to proceed with the analysis. So the committee discussed it, and the motion for the board is that the committee moves that the board approve the data sharing agreement with West Ed.
The motion is that the board approve the data sharing agreement with West Ed. Any discussion to that motion? Board Member Earl?
Yes, I'm sorry. I tried to look down it to see if I could find it. What is the length of, does someone have the details on the length of this research?
Oh my gosh, off the top of my head, I don't.
I'm here if you, I'm here from West Ed if you want me to speak to that.
Oh, bless your heart. Yeah, Chair, is it okay if our West Ed?
Go ahead.
Sure, thank you. The agreement would last through the last day of next year, so December 31st, 2021. We expect to be done with the research before then, but that's the date by which we have promised to destroy the data.
Do you mind if I ask just a couple more questions? I know this was in committee, but I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
Is that all right, Chair?
Names on this, because we've got people not being able to see everything, so they need to speak up to who they are. And
oh, sorry. This is Board Member Earl.
Okay, go ahead and ask your questions, and then Kenwin, if you want to introduce yourself when you respond.
So I have just a couple of questions. This has been an ongoing data collection, is that right? Or is it just a single year and you're going back a number of years?
So we are not collecting any data. We're asking USBE to give us already existing collected data that goes back a number of years.
My apologies. How many years are you going back with the data that we will be giving to you?
Yes, and I forgot to say, my name is Kenwin Derby, and I am with West Ed, WESTED, and I'm a senior research associate there. And we have asked to go back. Oh man, this was, we wrote this months ago. I believe it is up to 5 years.
Okay, and one more question. It's all the children in Utah, is that correct? Or within that time frame?
It is all the enrolled K-12 students in each given year.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't see any other hands for discussion. The motion is that the board approve the data sharing agreement with West Ed. Please vote. Board Member Davis. Okay, that motion passes. 1 no vote. Michelle Bolter voted no, and let's see, 1 person is not here. Let's see, Board Member Nielsen is not present. Is that correct? Shout out and tell me you're here if you're here. Okay, it looks like Board Member Nielsen's present, or not present, excuse me. Okay, Chair Lear, go ahead.
Item 14.3, CREDO, which is a acronym for something, request for use of data. Again, this is an existing agreement that the USB has with CREDO, and the information was gathered for one purpose, and now CREDO would like to expand the use of that data that would help explore the effectiveness of different kinds of, the management kinds of charter schools. And so the board discussed it, or the committee discussed it, I'm sorry, and the committee moves that the board approve the data sharing agreement amendment request of Credo.
The motion is that the board approve the data sharing agreement amendment request of Credo. Any discussion to that motion? I see none. Please vote. That motion passes with 1 no vote. Board Member Bolter and Board Member Nielsen is not present. Okay, Chair Lear, go ahead.
The next item, we're still discussing 14.4 adjudicative proceedings that will continue this month. On to 14.5, definitions for Utah State Board of Education Board Rules Amendment. And this was an amendment that would provide a definition of student threat assessment. And so the motion for the board is that the committee moves that the board approve R277-100 definitions for Utah State Board of Education Board Rule Draft 3 on second and final reading.
The motion is that the board approve R277-100 definitions for Utah State Board of Education Board Rule Draft 3 on second and final reading. Any discussion to that motion? I see none. Please vote. Board Member Davis? That motion passes unanimously. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, that motion passes unanimously. Again, Board Member Nielsen not present. Thank you.
The next item, 14.6, this is a new rule, R277-311, specialized endorsements. These were outlining requirements for educator licensing endorsements in driver's ed and FID and PE. And so the committee moves that the board approve R277-311 specialized endorsements draft 1 on second and final reading.
The motion is that the board approve R277-311 specialized endorsements draft 1 on second and final reading. Any discussion to that motion? Board Member Belknap?
Chair Lear, were there any questions, when you're talking about specialized endorsements, can you give me a couple of examples, or are we just talking about driver's ed physical education?
Those are the only two I recall, but I'm sure there's somebody online who would know more about this. It looks like Malia Height is available, and if you want, if Malia can respond to that, if that's okay. Vice Chair Cummins, please. She would
go ahead, Malia.
Give a better answer, I'm sure.
Can I interject before we get Malia on? And why are these considered specialized endorsements?
Yeah,
go ahead, Malia.
Good question.
Thank you so much for the question, Malia Height, Educator Licensing Coordinator. And these are specialized endorsements. It is specific only to driver education and PE, due to the safety concerns around those two content areas. And so that's why those two are have their own rules specialized, and there is state code that we need to make sure that we include within our licensing structure.
Thank you. Okay, I see no other hands. The motion is that the board approve R277-311 specialized endorsements draft 1 on second and final reading. Please vote. That motion passes unanimously.
And item 14.7 is a repeal because of the specialized endorsements that were included in the previous item. This is a repeal of R277-507 driver's education endorsement. And the committee moves that the board repeal R277-507 driver education endorsement on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion is that the board repeal R277-507 on second and final reading. Is there any discussion to that motion? I see none. Please vote. Board Member Gravitt, Board Member Newell. Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
And that explains why I had so much time to bother Finance Committee last month. That completes our report.
Thank you, Chair Lear. Okay, we're now to item 16, legislative session preparation. The first item is the funding request for school year 21-22. Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones.
Vice Chair Cummins, the Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Scott Jones. In the interest of time, can we just recognize Dale Frost? He's going to brief you on some changes that occurred with GOMB budget guidance since last meeting, and we'll just go right into it if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Dale.
And Jerry, if you could give Dale Frost the ability to share his screen, he's going to run his presentation.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Jeff. Do I click that? And then, all right. Okay. Is the presentation up, Chair?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me move quickly and because we're short on time. And so we did want to update the board on a key piece of the Budgetary Procedures Act, which is that the governor must require state officials, including public and higher ed officials, to provide itemized estimates of changes in revenues and appropriations. And so in effect, this is why we have to provide business cases to the governor's office, specifically the governor's office of management and budget and the legislature. GOMB provides guidance every year. This year in September, 2020, they provided this guidance, which we shared with you all, which was that due to the economic uncertainty, budget changes were not being solicited at the time. And they said in early October, they would assess whether that is going to remain the same or if any new revenues will be available. So on October 13th, we received updated budget guidance, and this is where kind of the change in approach is coming from. GOMB said after assessing the state's current fiscal situation, GOMB has determined it will accept agency budget requests for critical items. And they specifically said that one-time funds will likely be available for appropriation, with the possibility of some level of ongoing revenues materializing. I do want to stress that point that one-time funding may be more available this year, though we don't have revenue figures yet that are public at least. They did stress that this is subject to change, and they specifically said, GOMB, agencies should not request funding for any budget item that is not critical. So that caused us to really think about, and we realized we needed to come to the board and have a quick discussion on what are we deeming a critical budget item that we need to approve this month to send to GOMB, because the governor is working on his budget right now. And over the next couple of weeks, they will be finalizing their budget priorities. And then, but we know that there are other important budget items that you have not seen business cases for, and we need to have continued conversation with that we can provide later in December or January to both GOMB and the legislature. So these are definitions that we wanted to propose, Scott and I, to you all, that for a critical budget item for this purpose, it needs to be absolutely necessary and essential for the system's continued operation. And again, I want to stress this is as much about budgetary procedures than it is about the nature of whether one item is critical versus another. we recognize there are other important budget items and that they really should advance the board's strategic plans or other high priority policy objectives. Funding is still very uncertain. We don't know how much there is, but we do need to start working on this budget process and at least identifying the critical budget items and then starting the conversation on other important budget items. So on the critical budget items, I provide a little bit of guidance to you all. They should be very limited and they should be unrestricted funds so that LEAs can address their top local priorities would be my recommendation to the board. And so these are 2 recommendations to the board on critical budget items. And if the board approves this approach, these would be the only 2 items that we put into the budget system to send directly to GOMB, but it does not mean these are our only budget priorities for the 2021 legislative session. I also want to stress that we don't know how much these would cost. That is being determined by the Common Data Committee, and we've already talked quite a bit today about them in that process. But by mid-November, we should have the actual dollar figures for these. So first, enrollment growth. So new students, the Common Data Committee met and came to consensus enrollment projections for next year. And we aren't projecting a lot of enrollment growth. So just for your own reference, this last year, the cost for that was about $50.6 million. I put a placeholder amount of $35 million. I would wager it will be even less than that. But I can't give you a dollar figure until all of that CDC work shakes out. And then the other key conversation that we need to have is that we do want to make a statement on WPU value increase and what that will be. I put in a 4% as a starting place that aligns with USSA and USBA's recommendation. It's a little unclear about some of the specifics of that, especially given the likely passage of Constitutional Amendment G. That part of that would be covered in the base budget and adopted by EAC in December. And I'm not sure if by next December board meeting, we will have the exact figures on how much that inflationary adjustment would cost and those sort of things, or how much would be allocated for the House Bill 5011, which was another part of the Constitutional Amendment G. So the idea here would be that there would be a net increase, anything above whatever is included in the base to get to a 4% increase. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions from the board? Any questions, concerns about critical budget items and where we need to go from here?
Chair Huntsman.
I was just ready to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that the board approve the critical budget items of student enrollment growth and a 4% net increase into the weighted pupil, weighted pupil unit, and to send these business cases to the Governor's Office of Management and Budget according to the Budget Procedures Act. And I'd like
is there a second?
I'll second that. Board Member Marsh.
The motion is that the board approve the critical budget items of student enrollment growth and a 4% net increase in the weighted pupil unit, and to send these business cases to the Governor's Office of Management and Budget according to the Budget Procedures Act. Discussion to that motion, Chair Huntsman?
Yes, there's, again, as Del Frost said, there's a lot of unknowns, and I believe that by our December meeting, a few more knowns will come forward, but I think it's important for us to try to be in compliance. It's a good starting point, and it's also support some of our other stakeholders in this, but I'm anxiously awaiting for December to come so we can get really down into the weeds of some of our additional asks, but I think this will speak well for public education. This motion will, in our need and our desire and our expectations as we take this to the governor's office.
Board Member Lear?
I just want to know from Director, and I can never remember your title, Dale, but Mr. Frost, what does that mean for the other important budget items? I am super interested in all of those. I wouldn't want to have those fall by the wayside. Is the point that we would discuss those next month, but these would be taken, the first two would be taken care of this month? Is that what you're thinking?
Chair, may I answer that question?
Yes.
Earlier, great question. Fiscal policy analyst is my, I probably should have said my name, Dale Frost, fiscal policy analyst. So
my game.
Yes, after this discussion of critical budget items, we're going to start the conversation on other important budget items, and we're not needing to pass or prioritize these, but we do want to start to build a list of priorities for us to bring back next month with fully completed, updated business cases for you all, so that we can begin that process of adopting and prioritizing those. So in no way does this limit, but we do need to get the process rolling on the top level concerns, and then continue that conversation. I don't know if that answers your question.
That does perfectly. Thank
you. Yeah. I see no other hands up for discussion. The motion is that the board approve the critical budget items of student enrollment growth and a 4% net increase in the weighted pupil unit, and to send these business cases to the Governor's Office of Management and Budget according to the Budget Procedures Act. Please vote. Board Member Newell, oh, there. Okay, that motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. May I continue? Is that?
Yes, please.
Great, thank you. And I do want to also stress that we will know by next board meeting the exact dollar amounts for these two items. Again, these are placeholders. So will it really cost $169 million to fund these two items? I would think that number will come down, but we wanted to at least give you an idea of what they could cost. And that process will be finalized this month, and you'll have the actual numbers next month. Okay, so moving on the next, other important budget items. I want to just give you a few examples of some of the work and some of the things that we're hearing, but in this no way are these the top level concerns for other important budget items, but I need to provide some examples. Again, I was trying to think through how to give you examples of possibly how, again, this advances the board's mission or a board's goal, or a critical or very important policy objective. So the first one is actually a program that I'm working on that's top of mind. So the intensive services program was actually eliminated in the fifth special session. And this provides funds for those very highest cost special education students. What we found is that there are a number of problems with the program that was reduced or eliminated, on the state side. We also need to figure out what to do with the federal funding, and we're going to bring both of those recommendations to you. I've been working with a work group of LEA personnel. So these are business administrators, special ed directors, charter special ed directors, and other folks. And they've been very, very helpful in us creating, and they just approved on Friday the outlines of a pilot program that would get to this objective and actually provide more equitable conditions for those highest need kids. So we would love to be able to present that next month. If this was an item that the board wanted to include, we would we'd say the intensive services program, and we would come back with a business case next month for you. The next one, you are all familiar with. House Bill 67 was Representative Ballard's bill, and this would provide funding to upgrade LEA financial systems to better work with USIMS and to provide stakeholders with better data. This could be things like data around school fees and the accounting procedures required for that, and a whole host of things. And that would actually be an example of a restoration of an item that was cut from the 2020 general session. And so the third would be, we had talked about one-time funding would be more available, that the board may want to, and this is included in both UEA and the JLC priorities, to allocate some one-time funds to address health and technology related needs. And so this could be anything from technology, internet access, to, I've heard from some school district folks about wanting to make some changes to HVAC systems so that they can filter out virus loads and some of those kind of things. So we would let that be a local decision, but if that is a priority that you would like to see an actual business case written up on, we would probably add it to the list. So that's just some examples there. Again, I'm going to toggle over to another document to work on that, but we don't have anything in this category. We wanted to get direction from the board. And very quickly, so this would be the process going forward, that you've already adopted critical budget items, and we would like you to recommend items for consideration for this other important budget items list. If you do that, then, the board or USBE staff will submit those critical budget items to GOMB, and then we will prepare and update business cases for anything that you add to the other important budget items list. We already have, from our work back in July and August, a number of business cases that we retracted from after the GOMB guidance. And we may have to just update some of those, but other ones we may have to create new business cases. So then in December, our recommendation is that you begin to adopt and prioritize these other important budget items. Actually, one other thought I had, which even we would also share this GOMB list, or this list of other important budget items to GOMB. It wouldn't have all the specifics, but at least they could have that information on what the board is considering, as if there are other revenues that the governor can allocate towards education. So at least giving them all the information that we have at this point, and then continuing that dialogue going forward. So USB staff, if we follow along in this process, would share business cases that are adopted in December with the governor's office and the legislature. And then in January and February, you as a board would review, and if necessary, revise those lists of critical and or other budget items. Most likely, most of the work would be on the other important budget items list. And it, again, it's mostly about budgetary procedures. So if I'm going to stop sharing that, if I may, Chair, and bring up, all right, so how do I stop that? So if I may share this Word document. Okay. All right. I wanted to cover very briefly. So in the backups, there was a document, and we had shown this to you before, of all of the items that had been of general session 2020 general session reductions, but I wanted to cover very briefly the other needs and business cases that we have received outside of that, so we can start this discussion and maybe build this list of other important budget items. So this morning you heard from the Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind 3 business cases for one-time funds, and I'll just quickly go over those. That was to replace the Mill Creek Modular, which has a few classrooms in there and is getting very old, to replace the funding that was reduced for USIMAC, which is the Braille interpretation or processing and creating materials for blind students. And then Superintendent Coleman talked about the need for additional warehousing space and a cost-effective way of creating a steel warehouse structure with one-time funds. And so if the board would like to see those go to the legislature, they would need to be included in the items for consideration for other important budget items, either now or later. I also want to bring up on the USBE staffing needs. We received early on the bottom three of these. We have business cases for a school fees waiver auditor to go to assist with the work of school fees and fee waivers. And then there's been a request for a data analyst to improve the operations for federal and state programs. And then this is technically a 2020 general session reduction, but I wanted to highlight that we have a business case for it. There was $200,000 reduced from the mental health program, and that would have gone for a school social worker. And so there has been a request from staff to replace that. And then there was a discussion this morning about an equity director, and it's my understanding that if the board wants to go in that direction, that we could provide a business case and continue the conversation about ongoing funding for an equity director. And then let me quickly go through the others. I know this is a lot of information, and we don't need you to know or to remember all of the details, but it's more about, would you like to see further information and possibly act on these programs or requests? So the other two that we've received business cases for around new programs is to change the accreditation of schools process, to move from a private provider to bring that in-house, which would require 2 USB FTEs. And then we have a business case about an approach to address the special education teacher shortage, which would provide funds to teachers seeking their special education credentials. And then finally, I've already talked about the intensive services pilot program, but this other piece, one of the reductions was for the LEA administrative cost program. And we've heard from a number of rural districts, especially those medium-sized rural districts that are larger than 2,000 and smaller than 5,000 students, that reduction significantly impacted their unrestricted funds that they use for a whole host of different things, including administrative costs. And we have been in some conversations with districts about using the new NEST small district-based funding program and changes to that to help shore up some of those reductions. So that's this NEST small district-based funding program idea. So I would like to turn it over to the board and also maybe just check with Scott to see if there's anything I missed, and then would ask if the board would like to add items for consideration that we can bring back next month to you all.
Any questions or comments from board members? Board member Huntsman or Chair Huntsman?
Thank you, Brittany. I have, in managing expectations, would it take a motion to just have all of the prepared business cases compiled that we have today, and or try to keep some updated document there and have them forwarded to the board so that between now and our December meeting, we have a chance to go through and read the business cases, kind of set up our own priority list, and to be able to speak to them in that meeting and not go through a whole lot of discovery in that said meeting. And Vice Chair Cummins, would we need a motion to instruct staff, or is that something Dale or Scott, you guys are already planning on doing just because you have them and put them before us? I guess that's my question for procedure and or to meet everyone's expectations.
I guess if you were to make a motion, it would make it official that it would be on the December agenda, and that it would that those business cases would be prepared and available. So I don't see any harm in making a motion in that.
Okay, I'd like to make that motion to instruct staff to present to the board for consideration all existing business cases and any others that you'll be receiving from USBE staff to be available for board review, for board consideration in our December meeting,
So the motion, is there a second?
Second, Board Member Cannon.
I'll second it.
Okay. So the motion is that staff prepare an update. I'm guessing, is that the intent, Chair? If needed?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
prepare and or update all existing business cases and any other business cases that staff wants to put forward for our December board meeting. Okay, any discussion to that motion? Board Member Cannon?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, things that I'm hoping will be included under Chair Huntsman's motion. One is the University of Utah Reading Clinic, which we have prioritized and had on our list for several years, and it's never been funded. I'd like to see that be back on our list. And the other was we had, in the last legislative session, we had some money set to go to increase the number of schools that are able to participate in the Beverly Taylor Sorensen art program. And that money was withdrawn when they took all new money off the table. So I would like to see that go back on, and hopefully that comes under the umbrella of this motion. I just mention it to make sure that that's the case.
Deputy Superintendent Jones, just for clarification, so using these two as an example, the motion that Chair Huntsman made would include everything that had been and not funded in the last session. Is that how you're understanding that motion?
Yes, that's how I understand it. I think Dell and I can work through it. And we can also pursue the ones that Board Member Cannon has put out on the table as well for your consideration in the December meeting.
Thank you very much.
And Chair, if I may provide one clarification. So we have received and have, so for example, the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts Learning Program, we have from staff already that business case. But the items that were not funded, that were a business case from last year, like the University of Utah Reading Clinic, that is not, we can bring back that from last year. I don't know how you want us to. There were a few that, not everything was funded that we requested, that we had a good year before the pandemic. So it would be helpful to receive some guidance on how to proceed on those types of business cases.
Okay.
May I make a comment to Dale Frost's input?
Yes, please.
My understanding from checking with the people who do the reading clinic is that this has appeared on our priority list for a number of years and has made it all the way through, but that there was a particular legislator in Appropriations who would not fund it, and that legislator has now retired. So hopefully we could bring it back and make some headway on it this year.
Any other, Chair Huntsman, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This doesn't preclude, or this doesn't stop any board members from, if they have a question or I would like some information and they're unsure of what is coming, that they can ask for the business case and have it. This is all about streamlining the process and making us a little bit more efficient, or have the opportunity for more efficiency in our next meeting, because as many of you know, time seems to be our enemy at especially as we're getting our legislative requests together. So I don't think anything, this motion doesn't stop board members from checking with Dell and Scott if these are included, yes or no, and is the case still available or can it be updated? Am I correct in that assumption, Deputy Superintendent Jones?
Yes, sir, that's correct. I think the point, Chair Cummins, if I may, that's correct. I think the point that Dell's making, though, is ultimately, it is going to be the entire board's decision on what requests go forward. And, due to the circumstances we're under right now, a lot of the guidance that's coming out is critical versus important. So, ultimately, if we just provide a big long list, that probably wouldn't go very far once it came out of the board. But, there has to be this process, and we have to your point, acknowledge all our board members, make sure that we're, open to any suggestions and put it all in front of the board, and get to what right is as far as what the board's direction is for funding prior to the start of the legislative session. So I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you.
And Chair, may I add one point to that? I agree with Scott, and we will, and to Chair Huntsman's motion, we will provide these updated business cases as soon as we can and on an ongoing basis, and would be happy to provide any additional business cases. So the reading, the University of Utah reading program as an example, we'd be happy to see if there are any updates we need from the fiscal 2021 business case and can provide that. And so, but we would need board members to, if they don't see something they would like to see in December, to let us know.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands. The motion before us is to direct staff to update and provide business cases for any of the past items that were taken off or not appropriated last session or taken off the appropriation last session, as well as any other business cases recommended by staff or the board members for the December board meeting. All in favor, please vote. Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, does that complete item 16.1?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item 16.2, request for statutory changes. Is somebody going to be helping with that today?
Yes, Vice Chair Cummins. I was going to help with that, so
okay,
I'm just going to work. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm just going to work on sharing my screen. Okay, can you all see the list?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so Jill Curry, Program Analyst, and tonight I'm going to go through our requests for statutory changes. I will plan on going through the entire list, but if you have questions as we go, please feel free to stop me, and I'm also happy to take questions at the end as well. So the first request comes from recommendations made by the board's Assessment and Accountability Policy Advisory Committee. And it proposes amendments to the state's assessment and accountability provisions due to COVID-19. If you look at the backup documents, you can see the first recommendation from the committee is that the board does not calculate skip year growth for accountability purposes. And the second recommendation here is that the board should take steps to relieve schools from federal and state accountability determinations based on 2020-2021 school year assessments. So that's the first request. The second is to modify or repeal statutory language or consolidate reporting requirements as recommended by the legislative auditor in their audit of public education reporting requirements. The third request, this one is to, this request would enable LEAs to deliver the required parent seminar on mental health, bullying, and safety virtually. Currently, statute states that it is to be held in at least one school located in the school district. So the language that staff is proposing just would enable LEAs to hold that training in a remote or virtual setting. So the fourth request is for intent or statutory language that would allow a percentage of the funds from the appropriation for home and private school students for the statewide online education program to be used for program administration. We've seen in recent years, particularly this past year, this program was provided a pretty significant appropriation to fund additional home and private school students, but we haven't seen administrative funding for that as well. So the statutory change or intent language would allow a percentage of those funds to be used to administer the program. The fifth is a request to seek a legislative waiver for transportation funding for fiscal year 2022, so that it's based on fiscal year 2020 miles and minutes, which are pre-COVID miles and minutes, and this would ensure continuity of transportation funding. The next request is to pursue provisions related to auditing and monitoring public schools' use of state and federal funds. This is similar to what was in House Bill 469 from the 2020 general session, which did not pass. And then lastly, we are requesting approval to pursue a legislative waiver of TSSA program requirements for determining school performance, success, and student academic achievement for LEAs who may need it due to COVID-19 disruptions to the school accountability system to ensure LEAs can be allocated their TSSA funds. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Board Member Belknap?
Yes, Jill, can you give me just a little more clarity on number 6, to amend provisions related to the auditing?
Yes. Would it help? Do you want me to pull up the bill, or do you want me just, I can give you kind of some bullet points, or I could pull up the bill?
Just general.
Okay. So one is it specifies standards that the state board should use when monitoring a state-funded program. Another piece is that it provides procedures for the state board to recover state or federal funds that are misused by a charter school. And then kind of the third big piece of it is that it requires a charter school or education service provider to submit certain financial reports when a charter school enters a new contract with an education service provider. Those are kind of the three big components of that.
Thank you. And Chair, may I go ahead and make a motion?
Sure.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the request for these statutory changes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. Board Member Marsh.
The motion is that we approve these requests for statutory changes as presented. Discussion to that motion? Board Member Lear.
Yes, I have, and could you scroll down a little bit, Jill, to 3 and 4? I have a couple of thoughts about those that I hope would be friendly kind of amendments to this motion. I have long thought that this statute about delivering the parent seminar was far too prescriptive, and again, I feel a burden on LEAs to some extent. I would not suggest we should take it away. It should be removed. But I would like to be able to expand the scope of revising that statute to consider if there are changes that would be more reasonable and make the requirement more doable and helpful for LEAs. Is that, could that be revised? I don't know if you want to do it on the spot or if, and I don't know if Laura is willing to accept that as a friendly amendment or a suggestion to that, to number 3.
Carol, would it be okay if we added that for next month and fleshed it out and then added it back in? Fleshed out maybe what we want there?
Well, and I don't know if I know what I want. I just want to make sure it's not limited to, it's not as limited as it's written in number 3. That's, so I don't know if we should remove number 3 and bring it back next month. It seems like doubling the effort to discuss it again next month. If we could just, in the moment, say revise statute to accommodate changes to the parent seminar on mental health, bullying, and safety.
Jill, I'm not sure how the best or chair how to.
Board Member Lear, if you'd like to make a motion to amend, you're welcome to do so.
Okay, I'd like to amend. I've got another item I'd like to talk about in a minute too, but on number 3, I'd like to broaden that discussion to at least say revise statute 53G-9-703 Pren 1 to consider changes, revisions to delivery of the parent seminar on mental health, bullying, and safety.
So what I heard you say was to consider revisions to the delivery?
Of the parent seminar. Let's leave that delivery, stop talking about babies, to accommodate revisions to the parent seminar, to required parent seminars on mental health, bullying, and safety. I don't want to suggest in any way that I want to do away with them, but I think looking at this a little more broadly would be helpful if we're going to request some changes.
Okay, so is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second it. Jenny Gravitt.
Okay, so the amendment is that on for item 3 to strike accommodate virtual delivery options and add in the words to consider revisions to the parent seminar on mental health. Did I get that correctly, Board Member Lear?
Yes, I actually said required parent seminars and made seminar plural, but doesn't matter that much.
Okay. To the required parent seminars. Okay. Any discussion to that amendment?
Can I speak to that? I sort of did already. I think that I've just seen a number of requests for waivers recently and talked to LEAs who are requesting waivers, which are allowed if the LEA feels like it has covered the waterfront, so to speak. And I think accommodating or making allowances for virtual delivery is one change that could be made. I think we could look at how often they're required. I think we could look at the requirements that are pretty burdensome on LEAs to notify all the charter schools that are in their areas for equal participation. I just think we need to look at the requirement because it hasn't been revisited for 5 years. And this is an era where LEAs do not need extra responsibilities that are not proven and helpful.
I see no further discussion. The amendment is to remove the words accommodate virtual delivery options of and insert the words to consider revisions to the required parent seminar. Please vote on that amendment. Okay, that motion passes. The Aye votes were board members Cummins, Lear, Hanson, Thorpe, Gravitt, Cannon, Davis, Newell, Haynes, Marsh, and Huntsman. The no votes were Earl, Belknap, and Bolter.
I have another proposed amendment,
Okay, go ahead.
if that's okay. Number 4, I would like to broaden this one also. As we just belabored this subject, beat it up and spit it out. But I think one thing we didn't discuss is that if we're talking about how much money is left in the system for home and private school students, there is a lot. So I would like to more broadly consider the funds of how the funds should be spent in an administrative way about on SOEP. So let me try and in the moment request statutory intent or statutory language to consider a state appropriation for not just home and private school students, for the administration of the statewide online education program.
Okay, so just to get some clarity on your amendment, currently that's what it says is for program administration.
Yes, but it's specific to home and private school students. And I think
maybe we can get some clarity, because it's using the funds that were appropriated for statewide online home and private students for program administration. So it's asking to use the funds that were appropriated for that purpose for administration. Is that correct, Jill?
I can see what you're saying. Let me think. What I'm trying to get at, maybe Jill can help, or anyone's help I would be willing to take. I would just like to consider, for instance, if we're going to require LEAs to waive fees for SOEP programs, and this is a statewide program, I'd like there to be a fund that LEAs can access, so that it is not a single LEA's responsibility if it has an excessive number of SOEP students. So I'm looking for some broader language that would allow us to not even decidedly go that direction, but just explore, kind of in the spirit of what Cindy Davis was talking about. Let's explore that. Let's give ourselves the latitude to explore betterments, to use Chair Huntsman's word, betterments to this program that don't burden LEAs. So with that, does anybody want to suggest something or request statutory language, intend or statutory language to allow for a portion of the appropriation for the statewide online education program to be used to support program administration? How's that?
I apologize, Board Member Lear, but what I'm hearing you say is what the current thing is saying.
Except I want to get rid of you're focusing on the appropriation for home and private school students. Maybe what we should instead.
Okay, Jill, if you would like to speak to that.
Yes. So I just want to add one point of clarification, and it may help, it may not help. So part of the reason why it kind of calls out the home and private school student portion of the SOEP program is because for our public school students who are participating in SOEP, as you all already know, their funding comes from the minimum school program. So the funding that they already get through the state. However, that's not true of our home and private school students. So in order for them to participate in SOEP, it is a separate, distinct appropriation. And so that's kind of one reason why it's called out. The second is that that portion of the program has grown pretty significantly in the last few years as we've had more home school students and private school students participating in the program. So the thought was to tie a percentage to that appropriation and to be able to use that for program administration. So I don't know if that helps kind of add a little bit of clarity as to why home and private school students are called out.
I knew that information, but thank you for being very clear about it. I was just trying to broaden that possibility. I don't see a way to do it quickly, so I'll leave it alone for now. And then when it comes up for board discussion, I'll make my choices about supporting it or not. But I withdraw that concern. Thanks, though, for the explanation.
Thank you. Board Member Belknap? No, okay. Okay, so the motion before us is to approve the list legislative proposals. Excuse me, I'm going to start over. The motion is to approve the list of legislative change requests as amended. Any further discussion to that? Seeing none, please vote. Board Member Marsh? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Okay. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Is there anything else on that item?
No, that's it for that item. Thank you.